Why would they do that? Starship Flight 5 massively delayed by the FAA, SpaceX's villain arc, Starship fails a crucial test, can they try again? Science fiction rocket factory about to come online, Elon reveals how and when we will colonize Mars, and Polaris Dawn finally launches and sets the first record. My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's dive right in. Starship updates. Welcome back to Starbase, where we can see SpaceX prepping for launch and readying their prototypes for liftoff to Mars. Wait, did I just say Mars? That's a decade down the line, isn't it? Not according to Elon Musk. There is a huge problem for SpaceX though, which they might not even be able to influence. That's quite the intro. It hints at this episode being a big one. It is something we need to talk about because at this point it affects everyone interested in the Starship program. Don't sweat, let's get the facts in. First, we need answers. Let's examine the current state of the orbital launch site where these vehicles will eventually fly. SpaceX's Starbase was hit with heavy weather earlier this week. It slowed down the process of constructing Tower B. This is similar to some light storms that have hit Starbase in the last few years. There likely isn't any reason for concern. While this storm isn't comparable to any of the big hurricanes that have traveled that way, it brings lots of water to a place that already has plenty. That's what makes work more challenging than it should be. And then there is the FAA. It might not be as obvious as rain falling, but it does have an even greater effect on the Starship program. SpaceX wanted to launch 5 Starships this year. So far they have launched 2. The hardware is ready, I said it several times in recent episodes. So where is the license? Why isn't SpaceX launching? In an unexpected turn of events, SpaceX will have to wait slightly longer for launch day. SpaceX has been gearing up for Flight 5, incorporating a catch attempt. They've done so for 3 months now. As a reminder, Flight 4 was on June 6th. The FAA offered a faster license process back then if SpaceX wouldn't change the mission profile from Flight 4 to Flight 5, but they did. They now want to catch the booster. As such, they were required to obtain a new launch license that accounts for the Daredevil move. With launch vehicles being ready since the beginning of August, the license was expected to come as soon as SpaceX conducted a wet dress rehearsal, which would verify their vehicles for flight. The usual process. This hope was crushed when the FAA said they would only be able to finish it by mid-September, which prompted SpaceX to continue testing. I mean, a little extra time to make sure everything is ready can never be bad, right? Take a look at this. Here comes the next blow. A devastating news article published by CNBC accused them of releasing pollutants by using their launch mount flame diverter. The deluge system is under fire, pun intended. It might be easy to blame this on Elon Musk. It doesn't seem to be him though. SpaceX is under attack, not a single person. Gwynne Shotwell, the COO of SpaceX, is responsible for all FAA filings, not Musk. SpaceX pushed back immediately with a lengthy statement, prompting CNBC to edit the original article. There seems to be little agreement by the different parties involved. The other issue is that SpaceX claims they have been operating this system under a multi-sector general permit since 2023. And they have been in communications with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality since. That means that they have complied with both local and federal laws. This ordeal has caused significant disruptions to SpaceX's plans, and the FAA even went as far as opening an investigation into these claims. There is a question needing answers. Is SpaceX doing anything shady at Starbase? Do they pollute the environment without even having permission? For us on the outside, it is almost impossible to answer the question. Is SpaceX releasing harmful toxins into the environment through the deluge system? The water for the system is being brought in via trucks, and there aren't any obvious chemical leaks on site. None we could have ever seen, and we look at it very closely twice a week. From the ground, from the air, heck, even with satellites. So could those harmful chemicals come from the rocket during launch? After all, the exhaust does hit the deluge water. Does that change its property? As a methane rocket, Starship burns off almost all the harmful chemicals as it flies, which means contaminants from that are unlikely. The exhaust gas of a Starship primarily consists of carbon dioxide or CO2 and water vapor, as it burns liquid methane or natural gas as fuel and liquid oxygen as an oxidizer. Try making a toxin combining methane and oxygen. Compared to other rocket fuels, it produces a relatively clean combustion reaction. However, trace amounts of soot may also be present. That's it. It's a simple chemical reaction inside the engines. That's the beauty of methane. There is a reason why natural gas is promoted as the cleanest way of energy production if you want to use fossil fuels. Thankfully, after all this talk, the license was still expected to come around the middle to end of September. That's what we reported. That was until rumors began that the flight license could be delayed again. But what merit do a couple of rumors have in this case, right? Here comes the big one, brace for impact. On Tuesday, September 10th, all hell broke loose when SpaceX released a massive new update on their website. In the update, they reiterated that Starship is environmentally safe and then informed us that the FAA had again pushed back the launch date. They were fired up and seemed as angry, if not more, than us. A link to the article is in the description. Give it a good read after the episode. With such a strongly worded statement, you could tell they were trying to get the point across. The delay that the FAA stated wasn't until the end of this month. It wasn't until October either, or even the beginning of November. It was until the latter half of the 11th month of the year. SpaceX must wait until November or later to launch and catch Ship 30 and Booster 12. This would mean a 6-month gap between Flight 4 and Flight 5, which is almost as much as the gap between Flights 1 and 2. But this time it's not because of a damaged launch site, but because of bureaucracy. On the other hand, the FAA claims that it simply doesn't have enough resources to deal with the rapid launch cadence that SpaceX is trying to achieve. If this really is the reason for this delay, it just reiterates the organization's flaws. Instead of being rewarded for following procedures, SpaceX is publicly being accused and made to wait. That, though, is likely not going to benefit their Mars launch plans, which we'll talk about later. What do you think? What's your opinion on this matter? Write it down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Thanks to all this, SpaceX has now been given much time to develop Starships on the ground. Since we're already at the launch site, let's look at work being done on Tower B, which now has a chance of being ready before Flight 5. But before I tell you about that, let me show you a magic trick we use at Y when creating our episodes. So I know for a fact that many of you are very interested in how we make our videos. While some of it is obviously just good old magic, other aspects of how we create content can be logically explained. One such aspect is story blocks. Especially when I started Y, I struggled with many things. Things that make Y stand out, especially when released twice a week. Back then, I didn't know better. Now my advice is often that you should have just used story blocks. Imagine me just sitting here without the animations, music, pictures or videos. It looks kinda naked, right? Well then how about you dress your videos properly? We've used story blocks for years. They offer unlimited downloads of diverse high quality media for one predictable subscription cost. Say goodbye to expensive pay-per-clip pricing. Bye-bye. Producing content at a higher quality level is all about efficiency. Pre-made motion graphics can save you hours of production time. Storyblocks has thousands of templates for After Effects, Premiere Pro, Apple Motion, and DaVinci Resolve. They have the best motion library on the market, refreshed frequently with commissioned content based on customer demand. And I'm one of those customers. So while part of it is still obviously just magic, some is smart thinking. No one will ever tell me that I should have used Storyblocks because I already do. To get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, head to storyblocks.com/Felix or click the link in the description. That's what you should do. Sometimes it's the little things. Okay, how about that Tower B progress? The raising of the crane, which is still lying down for crews to remove boom sections, will likely be pushed back because of the heavy weather I mentioned in the beginning. The work needed to reconfigure this crane includes the removal of the smaller boom extension on the end. This setup was needed to stack the upper sections of the tower, and now it is switching to a smaller setup, very likely for the chopsticks and other parts that are still missing. Another step needed is the removal of a portion of the counterweights on the back, which balances the entire behemoth out. Less weight on the front means less weight needed on the back. This has already begun in some sense, but should pick back up now that the weather is clear. Different work that is being performed on the second orbital tower is in regard to the base. But Felix, didn't they finish the base months ago? Excellent observation. While the answer is yes, they have continued to flesh it out significantly. This concrete base is way more than just a foundation. It houses all sorts of vital systems. This small structure, sitting around the outside on the opposite side of where the orbital launch mount is located, is where the drawworks will go, the giant oil rig winch that SpaceX uses to lift and lower the massive chopstick assembly. They've been adding panel after panel to the outside of the frame in order to finish it. However, the internals are what's slowing them down from closing it up fully and sealing the deal. As we haven't seen any sign of the drawworks for Tower B, it appears that SpaceX will just continue prepping the housing for the installation. It will be great to see SpaceX install it relatively soon, however we know it'll likely be after the chopsticks are mounted. Now here's another rather bizarre situation happening at Starbase. This is our friend Ship 31, the prototype slated for liftoff on Flight 6. It is the last of the Block 1 starships. It is still atop the crab stand and is located at Massey's for a speculated static fire campaign. On Sunday, September 8th, SpaceX geared up for the first engine test of this vehicle, which comes almost 4 months after its initial cryotest failure. Frost lines formed on the prototype's belly and we saw venting nearby on the ground. And then, nothing. The vehicle was quickly detanked and the test concluded. But why? While it could be speculated that this was merely a cryogenic test to verify the tank's structural integrity, it seemed to be the real deal. I think that Ship 31 just wasn't feeling it that day. It was Sunday after all. All jokes aside, this actually isn't as strange as one may think, since aborts are quite standard in spaceflight, especially with these prototype starships. We've seen numerous static fire and spin prime aborts in the past, and this likely isn't the last one either. The bizarre part of all this is that Ship 31 has a very real chance of being ready for Flight 6 way before Flight 5 has taken off. To be honest, this feels very wrong. Now let's turn to the location this prototype originated from, the Star Factory, which is located at the build site. Ever since the first section came online late last year, this building has been the main means of constructing starships and has only grown since. But how long until it's fully completed? It is hard to tell since we rarely get a good glimpse inside, and the last one happened months ago, right before Flight 4. But if we put on our tinfoil hats and look at the progress since, we might be able to make sense of it. In early June, Tim Dodd, aka the Everyday Astronaut, got a good look inside, which thankfully revealed a lot about its internal progress. While we know that the initial section away from Highway 4 and the second one have been online for a while, we still haven't heard about the last two. In his interview, however, we saw that the building had already been fleshed out and merely awaited furnishings such as bridge cranes, turntables, and welding equipment. This section will accommodate things such as Starship nose cones, meaning they likely needed more time to build the specialized equipment. As you know, they still have some minor work to complete, such as the side closest to the office building, but aside from that, there isn't much more to be done. One of these last-minute upgrades this week was a new door. Maybe not that exciting at first glance, but I believe this could be our best way to get a glimpse inside during the coming days. We talked about this odd opening in a recent update, and it's located near the megabase. This large wooden frame was positioned outside the entrance. If you zoom in close enough, you can see the words SpaceX Doors. It contained these glass door frames. This door will seal the inside from the dusty environment. There is a huge construction site right outside of it after all. Once the door is in, SpaceX can start cleaning the inside, and then they'll be ready to move more dedicated hardware inside for installation. I am constantly talking about more given time thanks to the FAA regulatory disaster, but according to Musk, there is no time to waste. SpaceX needs to start producing Mars-capable starships sooner rather than later, as new plans suggest we could be closer to that first flight to the Red Planet than anticipated. Time for the big news. It is Elon update time. In an X post on September 7th, Elon dropped a huge bombshell on us. One that wasn't even considered prior. The post said that SpaceX still hopes to launch the very first uncrewed starships to Mars in 2 years, as soon as the next Mars transfer window opens. This means that a Mars-headed starship could be ready by 2026, but is that even possible? According to the X post, SpaceX doesn't just intend to see if they can fly a starship towards Mars. This does look like a full-blown landing test with several ships. What? This is important since the next bombshell he dropped was plans to land the first crew on Mars in December of 2028, which is when that transfer window to Mars will start. That's right, according to Musk, we could be only 4 years from another Neil Armstrong moment, just bigger and more important. This would be insanely quick for any space program, especially one so ambitious. The question that we're probably all asking right now is whether this is simply Elon time or not. He often has goals that seem far-fetched and are delayed months or even years. However, I do believe that with the efficiency of this program, that timeline might be possible. Even if there is a delay past 2029, we would still be able to see a launch as soon as 2031 when the next window opens. Of course, this all could be slowed by bureaucracy. After all, SpaceX wants to launch 25 Starships per year from Starbase. This year so far, we've seen 2. And that is not because of SpaceX. The real question is if these bureaucratic systems are even capable of following such a timeline. The real question doesn't seem to be whether SpaceX is willing or capable. The question is if a Clean Water Act might be more important. Is it? Again, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, pro and contra. Similar to the delays on Flight 5, this would be an unsolvable hurdle in SpaceX's mission to colonize Mars. If we see 25 launches per year, chances are good. If we see 2, not so much. Here's my opinion. Regulations are there to prevent harm to anyone or anything important to us. If a regulation prevents something important to us from happening, it should be changed or at the very least streamlined. Maybe the so-called middle ground leaves room for a colony? Now here's a story that happens a little closer to home, right here in high Earth orbit. If you've been following our channel recently, the name Polaris Dawn will be no stranger to you. Founded by billionaire Jared Isaacman and SpaceX, the Polaris program is a series of crewed space flights featuring different very important technology demonstrations. And the first of those 3 planned missions is known as Polaris Dawn. We had been waiting for this monumental launch for months and were starting to get impatient after countless delays. The weather didn't play well. Thankfully, this finally came to an end. On September 10th, 2024, at approximately 2 a.m., it was finally time for the crew of 4 to board Crew Dragon Resilience. We thought another delay was coming when, with only 44 minutes left, the count recycled. But thankfully, just 2 hours later, they finally reached a point where they could begin propellant loading. The countdown reached the final stretch and we held our breath in anticipation. Finally, the 9 sea-level Merlin engines all lit successfully and the vehicle took to the skies. What's to say about Falcon 9 other than it works? The ascent went precisely as anticipated. Thumbs up from Jared and on we go. Stage separation confirmed at 2 minutes and 45 seconds into the flight. There was no visible problem during the landing of the booster either. I've been closely watching this recently because of the 2 landing failures of older boosters, all good this time. Then the big moment, Crew Dragon separation, welcome to space Polaris Dawn. There was one thing left to do. The nose cone needed to be opened. You might think this was in preparation for the upcoming EVA, but that was only supposed to happen on flight day 3, September 12th. So why do that now? There is something special about this mission. They are going far, far away. This is what happened. They exposed the hatch. This is a hatch and not a docking adapter, as they plan on exiting the capsule during the flight. But there is something else that got exposed. The Draco thrusters. This is not sponsored. This is a small shout out to a friend of mine, morethan3d.com. He makes these models. Go check it out. Take a look at this absolutely stunning view. Whoever had the idea of putting the camera on that nose cone deserves a medal. Using the Draco thrusters, they raised their orbit to an astonishing 1,400 kilometers above the planet. This is further away than anyone has traveled since December 9th, 1972, further than any human has gone since Apollo 17. But this isn't even the most exciting part. Remember that hatch? It is kind of important. Once they arrived in the correct orbit, 2 of the astronauts, Commander Jared Isaacman and mission specialist Sarah Gillis, stepped out of the vehicle. Risk it all and take the spacewalk. The event was planned for September 12th, meaning episode 399 was already finished. Here's the footage that came in last second. This is the first ever spacewalk of a civilian, and it demonstrates that all this can be done without NASA. This is a huge step for private spaceflight. Spacewalks are needed. As much as NASA always speaks of redundancy in crew capsules and rockets, this is the other way around. SpaceX is creating a redundancy to NASA. This opens up a new chapter for private spaceflight and future endeavors. Instead of only government employees being able to travel to space, there is a private service now. Anyone who wants to do this in space will no longer have to go through NASA. This will help to radically change how we approach private space exploration and eventually drive costs down, making it accessible to everyone who has plans for outer space. So thank you SpaceX and Jared Isaacman, go Polaris Dawn! That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more awesome content, and consider becoming a patron or a channel member. This is what fuels the algorithm and it helps us immensely. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A link is in the description. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Head again, pushed back. They pushed it. JAXA. The probe had never seen before? The fourth of 6 flybys of the planet and spitting like crazy.